We're live, but we're not live. Give Cecil this. What do you think, by the way, is a little bonus content? The Cleveland Indians going, what are they going to be? The Cleveland Spiders? Do you have any feelings there since we're going to start in
They're
Cleveland
going to
now?
be the Cleveland Spiders. That's what
I
they're
don't
going to
know.
be called?
I saw the Cleveland Spiders hats. I don't know.
I
The
could
Cleveland
dig
Spiders.
that. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah,
I
but
like that.
are you welcome the change away from the Indians, Chief
Yeah.
Wahoo?
I do.
It's good. I think it's good. Sell a bunch of new merchandise. All right, let's create some merchandise. How should Browns fans be feeling today? That and more this week on the couch. Matt Waldman here. Matt, I'm going to have you speak for Browns Nation. They had all of us captivated, even though it wasn't the result you were looking for. Is this the demons are exorcised, or is this another painful chapter of being a Browns fan?
I think it's more of the former than the latter. And I probably wouldn't want to speak for all Browns fans because most Browns fans are like, when are you going to admit that Baker Mayfield is good? Not yet, my friends, not yet. But he did better last night. He had some moments where he could shine, and I thought he did a good job. And he showed some things in the pocket with a couple of throws and a couple of plays that were good. But there wasn't enough extensive testing there that I would say that he's the guy that I think people wanted him to be. That said, Cleveland Browns playing the Baltimore Ravens, it was very poetic in this sense because the team that basically the city that inherited the soul and the rich soul of the Cleveland franchise when Art Modell ripped it out of the city, comes to play in Cleveland for a team that I've always joked was kind of the zombie version of this team. And last night's game was, I thought, the best way to put it is encouraging because Cleveland stuck to its game plan. It didn't panic. It ran the football. It had timely passing, big plays from Mayfield, from his receivers, Donovan Peoples-Jones, but they stuck to using their running backs the way that they wanted to, and they have two of the best running backs in the league. And they played patient football and started to really wear down and get back into that game and just kept going to that. And it was a hard-hitting game. The Browns came back from a deficit. And while it ended like a lot of things that I'm familiar with as an 80s Browns fan, which is, you could call it a heartbreaking loss, but I guess as someone who's seen my share of heartbreaking losses, and why I know I'm a Browns fan through and through is that no matter what team I followed since I abandoned Cleveland when the Ravens basically stole the team, I went to the Titans and they lose at the 1 yard line. I go with the Seahawks, they would lose at the 1 yard line. They won one, but they lose at the 1 yard line. It's like being a Cleveland Browns fan has followed me wherever I've gone. So I knew that's like, no matter where you go, there you are. So you look at this particular situation and it's like that. This is where Cleveland left off. This is something to build on. They got a little of their soul back yesterday. The way they played the kind of Cleveland Browns football that you would see when they were good. And I think that they still have a ways to go. It would be a pleasant surprise if they win in the first round of the playoffs. It would be an even more pleasant surprise if they got to an AFC championship game, but it would be a completely Cinderella event on that level. But I think that this is a team, the window is open and the coaching staff has done a good job with this team. And they're a scary team in many respects. If you are forced to play them in their environment that they want to be in, which is cold weather, windy weather, conditions ripe for running the football, or you can't get a pass rush or play tight man coverage against them, this team has the offense and defense to beat you, and they're going to and like most AFC North teams, when they're good, they'll smack you around and intimidate you or make you really work hard for it, and you're going to know that you were in a football game. Whereas some of these teams in the NFC, I joke around, teams don't know that they're in a football game. But that's something me and Bloom we can have in common. Is that's why I root for the AFC North no matter what, because if the Steelers make it to the championship, I don't want to see any fake football. I want to see like real football. I know that the Steelers are going to bring it all the time. So as much as we joke on these shows that we have this antagonism, AFC North football rules. That's basically how I go.
We're back there. We're back. Yeah, it's great. I was making the point on the show with Cecil today that there really should be no bigger rivalry. And I think of you when I think of this, no bigger rivalry than the Browns and the Ravens. Like there should be no rivalry that has more intense feelings rooted in reality beyond the football field. But also they bring out the best in each other. And I think the emblematic team, by the way, I'm all for it. You talk about old school. Like we're graybeards, right? Stoking the AFC NFC rivalry, because there was a while there in the 80s that the NFC was just clowning on the AFC.
Yeah.
So, and the emblematic team for that NFC, they don't even know if they're in a football game, is the Packers, right? Right?
Yes. Because I'm sorry, there's a lot of teams.
Well, the Rams,
the Rams are getting more physical now.
Yeah,
but like. It's funny, like when I watch, you can compartmentalize this and you don't realize it comes out in you until you get to these moments. So like, yeah, I don't dwell on AFC versus NFC most of the time, but then like when someone brings it up and says AFC or NFC, I'm like, oh, AFC all the way. Like if you ask me to watch a bad AFC game versus a good NFC game, I'd still probably choose the bad AFC game because there's just something about the AFC and the history of it's a little more interesting to me. But it's true. Like I think the AFC, like to me, I mean, I'm going to piss off a lot of like NFC East people, but I think the NFC East is like pretending to be like in some of the tougher AFC teams. They're like front runners.
Well, Washington beat Pittsburgh. The Browns get to put the money where the mouth is with this one because that's who they play this week, the Giants. And so you're right.
Yeah, and again, in reality, as a football writer and fan, and what we do, they have a tremendous rich history, some extraordinarily tough teams, fantastic thing. But when I think of like the AFC East or the NFC East. In their worst moments, their best moments, they're great, absolutely great. But at their worst, I think a bunch of posers. And then when I think of like when I think of the AFC's North, to be fair, when I think of it, I think of a bunch of thug football players who like beat the crap out of each other at the expense of actually playing good football.
Right.
So it's like it gets to the point where it gets to the point of ridiculousness. So, or guys who don't even, athletic guys who don't understand how to play. It's like, so, I mean, every team has that mirror kind of thing.
And next week, Green Bay is going to play Tennessee. So that should be a fun one to see the contrast in styles, right? Because as you were waxing poetic about Cleveland, what they have going for them, if they can make the playoffs, and all they have to do is beat the Giants and the Jets. If they get to 11 wins, they're good on tiebreakers. It's crazy. An 11-5 team could miss the playoffs in the AFC because so many teams have played well or consistently enough. But the Browns do have that quality where if you can't figure out how to stop Chubb and Hunt, it's going to be a long afternoon. Just the same way like with Derrick Henry, but they can add more wrinkles. The main change, and Paul Charchian and I have toasted this a few times over the course of the season, is it's a good organization now. It's a well-run, it looks like it's the front of a well-run organization. And Kevin Stefanski, I was describing this to Cecil when we were talking about this game. Teams don't go forward enough on fourth, right? And there was this point in the game when they were like, around like the 25 or 30 or it was like a 4th and 4, and you could tell that with Stefanski there's not even a pause. It's the default. It's not like, whoa, we have to think about this. Likewise with going for 2 when you score a touchdown down 14. Kay and I are watching the game. She will stand on the table and say teams should go for 2 every single time. Like you should just never kick an extra point. And if Cody Parkey is your kicker, that actually sounds like an even better argument. But you just like this. Stefanski he's not afraid of judgment. He's not afraid of well, what if I don't do it the way everyone else did it before?
Yeah.
And you can tell that Baker Mayfield is bought in. The team is bought in.
And that's exactly it. You got a workman-like team. That's the Cleveland Browns for me, is a team that's like, to me, when they drafted Nick Chubb, to me that was like the best moment I had as a fan, because I was like, I'm watching him all those years at Georgia. When people describe him as a quiet assassin, that's what he is. It's like, he's quiet, but yeah, if you antagonize him, he'll get on Twitter and like say, yeah, you Texas boys, wait till you get a load of us, we'll run you over. Like, he'll say some things, but he's one of those guys that if he says something, you probably should take it to the bank, because he rarely talks. And so I want a team that's less talking, more hitting. So that's why I didn't like Baker Mayfield, even personality wise, because it was more talking, less play. And so if he can continue to like mature, and his game continues to mature, and he can follow the leadership of some of the guys that they have, that's good, because this is a team that you want to see the action. The fact that Chubb even wears Marshawn's "I'm all about the action" number is like pretty much indicative of that. So you look at Andrew Berry, he's probably brought some calm, even if I don't know enough about Andrew Berry to tell you like what he's done to make this great. And I'm sure we'll leave that to all the reporters this offseason to give him some sort of credit. But I'll say this, he didn't get in the way. He wasn't an old football mind who was like, let me impose my will of what I have to do on you and do some outmoded thing rather than listen to what you as a coach need to do. And so, that's a positive in itself. And you have to look at the Browns and think, well, maybe in the recent years under their ownership, that they've realized that they've made enough mistakes that they've learned from them. Maybe that's part of it too, is that some of these embarrassing mistakes, they said, well, maybe we need to temper this back a little bit and emphasize this a little bit more. Maybe we need to get an even balance of different concepts in here, and we need to get leadership that works well together, not just bring diverse people into the mix who are not open to diverse ideas, because that's a problem too, is you want inclusion in what you're doing. And if you're just diverse, but everybody's like rooted in their own, ivory tower, in their own silo, then you get what you got 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
It is an organization where everyone's pulling in the same direction. And it's exciting. It's just exciting to watch. Chubb and Hunt, I think, are emblematic of this team in a way, too, because they're about there's no I in team. They don't care that one of them could be getting a lot better numbers if the other one wasn't around. Hunt signed an extension before the season. I would guess that Chubb's going to sign an extension before his rookie contract is over. They've got the blueprint, and it's fun. It's going to be fun. Okay, it's the fantasy football playoffs, and I wanted to mention, by the way, too. Did you see? I thought of you. I almost sent you something for Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah.
Oh, well, thank you. Happy Hanukkah to you as well.
Yeah. And it was funny. I was reading up on the sort of schism between, is Hanukkah to celebrate a war victory, or is it really about the miracle and the faith? Anyway, that could be like off the rails. Then this is our Hanukkah corner. But I saw that Ernest Biner actually includes an autographed football card when you order one of his books from him. Did you know that?
Yeah, I actually follow Biner. So
yeah, so you saw that.
I did. I've been meaning to like actually buy some product from him, so that's cool. Now, if my wife and I've tried to teach my wife like the Hebrew Hanukkah prayer, like my wife and daughter in the past. So we have some jokes that are actually football oriented, because there's a at the end of the prayer, there's this lahadlik ner is one of the phrases at the end of the prayer in Hebrew. That's how you would say the lahadlik ner. But my wife would mispronounce it by accident, and she once said lahad mcnair, and I thought that's perfect. That's marrying my wife.
Yeah,
I know. Right now we're getting married because she said lahad mcnair. So there we go.
That, and she makes a mean shelf, like the pantry.
She's killer. I don't deserve her. So there you go.
Right. Good at lots of things. And I love that Ernest Biner's book is called Everybody Fumbles. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's perfect. I mean, it's a great title to make you want to read more, to make you want to really dive in and see what his wisdom and his hard-earned life experience can he put into a book. But I don't know if there's anything in Everybody Fumbles. Here it is, Matt. Everybody benches Miles Sanders in week 14 sometimes,
that happens.
Right. Everybody fumbles. But what do you do at this point in the fantasy season when there's so much more pressure and focus on lineup decisions to give yourself some clarity? And there's ways, there's the quality of the player. Like Miles Sanders, I guess, stood for just play your best talents, which kind of comes back around to an almost Adam Harstad of play the players you invested a lot in, because there's a reason you invested a lot in them. And if you're only going on those past 3 weeks with Sanders and how morose the Eagles offense was, you missed out on that. There's also the matchup, and there's also the situation. Sometimes you're a unit, or if you're making choices this week, we'll talk about some players in the heat check, like just the quarterback you're attached to, or the play caller. Even I feel like more and more, Matt, I feel more comfortable playing a Kevin Stefanski player or a Kyle Shanahan player. Or alternatively, I don't want to depend on Jason Garrett. If I have to break a tie, I'm going to say, is there a Jason Garrett? Is Evan Ingram part of this choice? But what are some ways that you get yourself to commit when it's the fantasy playoffs?
Well, this is fun because this is kind of like more advanced fantasy theory we've got going on here, because that's the stage that we're at.
Yeah.
Let's do the autopsy on Miles Sanders for a minute, because you can learn something from that. What we can learn from that is that, I was doing, when I did the roundtable last week, most everybody was pretty much like tough matchup, wouldn't ever consider starting Jalen Hurts, because the Saints are just a really good defense. Well, some things to think about, and these are things that you can easily overthink, but let's put them into perspective. One thing that you do is look at points scored by position versus defenses, but then don't just look at the points scored, but look at the type of players that scored against it. So if you're looking, you go, well, the New Orleans Saints haven't faced a quarterback who can actually break the pocket and run for more than 10 yards. That's an interesting thing. Is when they face quarterbacks who could throw deep, were those teams productive against them? Yeah, those quarterbacks were productive against them. Okay, so when you have a quarterback who can throw deep and stretch the field horizontally, and he can break the pocket and run for yardage and stretch it vertically, and the team knows that the guy's built like a running back that's going to use him, well, suddenly you start going, who are quarterbacks that can do that? Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson. You look at guys like Taysom Hill. Who benefits from that? Running backs.
Right.
So running quarterbacks who can run, get your running backs in the lineup. That's a good thing to kind of learn. I think those are things that I always consider as like that. I consider how dependent are the players that I'm wondering about. Are they on different players? And how does a new player change that? So Marvin Jones, now who's been hot recently, has to deal with the possibility of Chase Daniels. What do I look at for that? How does that impact DeAndre Swift?
Mm-hmm.
I'd be more apt to start the running backs and the tight ends who are going to run shorter patterns than the guys who are going to stretch the field with Chase Daniel. So that means Marvin Jones, I'm a little worried about. Guys like T.Y. Hilton, a good example of a guy who's been hot since week 10, who's like number 4 in fantasy since that time. And you look at the teams that he's played and you go, well, he's played some crappy teams. But then you look at the Colts and go, they've played pretty much crappy teams all year. If you actually look at their schedule, it hasn't been all that impressive. So, and then they play Houston again, who's the only thing worse than their pass defense is their run defense. So it's you look at that and you go, okay, well, then, what about Pittsburgh, though? Because he faces Pittsburgh after that. So then you start looking at Pittsburgh and go, well, who wins in Pittsburgh? Well, primary wide receivers have won against Pittsburgh. It's not, because they get them a ball enough. And then maybe it's garbage time. Maybe it's the combination of them working that player open. Michael Pittman's a one-dimensional player right now. He's a good player, a good young player, but he's a crossing route guy. That's what he's getting targeted on. So T.Y. Hilton's your every man. So if you're going to pick up a player who's like, or you're going to start a player that maybe you wouldn't have started all year, that's a good example of a guy that you like and go, the relationship with the player, how he's playing, and then you look at the teams and go, who's beaten those teams? Who's won fantasy wise versus those teams and why? And does that player fit the profile?
I think it's excellent. Nat, just from what you just said, some enterprising person out there in the fantasy world, everybody's looking to find their angle in fantasy. Nobody's made a tool yet that filters matchup information by a type of player. You can even do this at a very high level. And Warren Sharp does some stuff like this, where you're going to get a lot of stuff from Warren Sharp, like how defenses perform against certain personnel sets and things like that. So that gets you one step of the way. But I think that's also something we can do ourselves. As you said, just look over it and look for the peers. I think it was Heath Cummings that said also with matchups, you're looking at the tail ends, like the really good and really bad ones. Those are the ones that should persuade you, at least factor into your decision making. So it's going to be interesting because you're right. You bring up Chase Daniel. I think it's a great one to grapple with if he's going to start this week, because Tennessee's such a good matchup. Because otherwise, you would want to play. You generally want to err on the side of playing players against Tennessee. You want to err on the side of playing players against Houston. You want to err on the side of playing players against Dallas, unless it's Giovanni Bernard over Miles Sanders, like I did last week. Anyway, what is Cincinnati doing? Benching Giovanni Bernard. Cincinnati's going to Cincinnati. But I think that looking for peers is good. Also with Miles Sanders, you're absolutely right. And a few people did point out that Jalen Hurts could give Miles Sanders more of a chance to break something because of the extra tension and the run pass options. The only problem was that, you had Doug Peterson and Jordan Howard trying to get sprinkled in. And Sanders is probably going to go back to this week against Arizona, like 8 fantasy points or something, but he'll be in everybody's lineup.
And that's the crazy thing with this week, because then you look at a guy like Budda Baker, who can like basically erase any edge run, and you go, do I really want to start Jalen Hurts this week? Because next week it'll be good, but this week may not. So, because I think he's got a good matchup next week.
So, and folks, feel free while we're here. We're going to go on our long flowing talk, but if you have any burning questions, please. We're here. Although, again, I always lead with, you made it this far, you should trust yourself first and foremost.
Yeah.
But Paul Langelier says he's playing McLaurin every week. He's in week 15, and despite playing McLaurin every week, and McLaurin helped set you up to get this far.
Yeah.
Think of benching him for Woods and Kupp. McLaurin's playing Seattle. Not sure who his quarterback is going to be. Woods and Kupp are playing the Jets. I think this is McLaurin on the bench.
Wow. If you're going to go by targets and how they're relied upon, I would say the safest play is, God, I hate to say this, but probably Kupp and McLaurin. Mm-hmm. But, I haven't kept track of Woods this year in terms of how he's been. I mean, he's such a great player, but like looking at PPR where we have Woods, Kupp's 19th, Woods is 12th. Okay. Yeah. So probably when you're looking at Woods, and let's look at his recent targets here, looking at his game logs recently, he's still getting, 15, 12, 11, 8 targets. He's had no less than 8 targets since week 8. Then you go Woods, McLaurin. I think that's probably where you go with that, but it's just to spread it out some. I think that the problem is that, yes, it could easily be another, it could easily be a 40-3 game like the Seahawks had against the Jets. But then, now you're feeding Josh Reynolds into the equation. Now Van Jefferson gets into the equation. Terry McLaurin's more likely to have to get targets over and over again. And he's such a good route runner, and he's good at every point on the field, that I would feel safer with him.
It's fair. Look, McLaurin. So what do you have with McLaurin this week? Player talent, yes. Situation, no. Even if Alex Smith plays, who knows how long he's going to play? If Dwayne Haskins plays, that's not great. I mean, it's not ideal. Seattle as a situation to attack, it's not as bad. At least they're not as bad of a defense as the numbers indicate. You watch to see if Carlos Dunlap plays. some of it even depends on Washington's defense. If Washington's defense can frustrate Russell Wilson and keep this a close game, then McLaurin may not end up as good of a play. You really want Washington to fall behind. With Kupp and Woods, what you like about Kupp and Woods, I think, Matt, is that the plays that Sean McVay calls are going to work against the Jets.
Yeah.
Like when Kupp or Woods are getting those run after catch opportunities, those are going to turn from like 6-7 yard targets into 20-yard gains. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kupp is probably good for one where he's running free. It may be a touchdown because it's the Jets. It's the Jets.
Yeah. Now, what I would add is that Dwayne Haskins started the first 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first 4 starts with McLaurin earned 7 targets, 10 targets, 8 targets, and 14 targets with Haskins. And in each of those games, that meant 5 for 61, 7 for 125, and a touchdown against Arizona. Cleveland, 4 for 83, Baltimore, 10 for 118. So to me, Haskins has a favorite. And oh yeah, they played together in college. So right. It's kind of like, that rapport is long standing. I think if all things considered, to me, that's kind of why I'm leaning that direction a little more. But I get where you're coming from with the Kupp. That's a tough decision.
It's tough. And we'll do some. Let's just jump to the heat check section. Basically, This is just kind of, and we can go. I tried to find the players matchups that are the toughest, like right on that line. And we can just go through like the classic, the heat check, the cold, cool, sure. Lukewarm, warm, hot. In general, if people were coming to you, let's start with some quarterbacks. Okay. Ryan Tannehill against Detroit. It's a volume versus efficiency question here. Especially, let's assume Chase Daniel starting.
Yeah. I think that this is one that I'd feel lukewarm on that one, which means that there's probably a dozen players that I would prefer.
He's going to throw the ball 20 times. It might be for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, but he's going to throw the ball 20 times. What about Ben Roethlisberger? Don't ask me. I'm going to be negative. What about Ben Roethlisberger? Again, he threw 4 touchdowns against Cincinnati like a month ago, but I think that was before his knee injury and before, if you ask me, he started to look very predictable.
Yeah, I'm actually going to say warm on that one. I would probably start him over Tannehill because even though I watched that Bills game and it looked rough, I think the Bengals are bad enough that even what the Steelers are doing in a limited fashion can work and they can expand beyond that.
So to branch off of Roethlisberger, what about Chase Claypool? What about Deontay Johnson? What about James Conner, who has this quad injury? What about we know it all converges at Ben and it's Cincinnati, so you're going to harvest a lot of the value. What about his supporting cast?
I'm just saying no to the running backs right now because it was just an awful display between that and the line. It was so bad I didn't recognize that Marquise Pouncey was out there. And and FF Ball Blaster. I can't pronounce your last name, Michelle, but she does fantastic work. And Michelle was like, yeah, actually that was Pouncey. And I was like, whoops. Okay. So, but yeah, it was rough. So there a lot of short passing, which means to me, I would probably feel better about Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster.
Juju's the guy I think you're automatically playing.
You got to play Juju. Yeah, Juju is like hot. I would say Deontay Johnson is probably warm. I'm a little bit more on like the cool side for both Claypool and Washington because it seems like Washington's getting into the mix, and that's kind of taken away a little bit because teams are figuring out how to play Claypool deep, and I think that's hurting him.
There's something about Claypool. We finally see the warts on Claypool, right? It's just the way he plays the ball in the air. It could be better.
Yeah.
It could be better. Okay, quick hitter. A few quarterback questions since we're on the quarterback position from the chat room. The Randerson 10 says Justin Herbert on Thursday against the Raiders or Jalen Hurts. Wait for Hurts playing Arizona.
I'm going with Herbert. I think Herbert rebounds. He still played well, and again, the matchup, just a better matchup, way better
AFL.
matchup. Yeah.
It's an AFL matchup. Yep. It could be the vertical, the light show. And that's the thing, like some of this stuff is if you're an underdog, Carr might be a better choice than some of these safer plays. For instance, the safer plays Francis is Ryan Tannehill we talked about, or Phillip Rivers against those Houston Texans.
Rivers. I'm going with Rivers because again, it's like they're hot in terms of T.Y. Hilton's playing well. And I think it's more that Phillip Rivers has discovered T.Y. Hilton. Like the rapport has finally clicked, because last week when he threw the trust ball to Hilton in the back of the end zone against the Raiders defense, which again was like overplaying stuff and just had a lot of misses. That's why you start Herbert. Hilton just is making those tight, tough catches. I think, honestly, I'd love to see T.Y. Hilton in Houston with Deshaun Watson. He'd be the mini version of DeAndre Hopkins, even at a ripe age right now, just for at least a year. I'd love to have him there.
He famously said, "I'm coming home," whenever he found out he had to play a playoff game in Houston. He knows about these matchups. And yeah, T.Y. Hilton, you just don't bench this week. It's a very short list of players that I say you bench T.Y. Hilton for. Go ahead.
I benched him. I picked him up in a league with a bunch of writers and with a struggling playoff team, and forgot to start him. And if it weren't for J.K. Dobbins and his 2-point conversion, I would have beat my buddy Mike McGregor by 0.3 points last night. So that was a heartbreaker in a reverse way. At least my team came out of the bathroom, I guess. So there you go.
Right. Yes. So many different twists and turns. That game was so cinematic.
Yes.
That game, I mean, we could have talked the whole hour about that game. Yeah. It was cinematic. There were 5 or 10 or 15 moments in the game that a director and a writer could not have come up with a better moment to encapsulate the intensity that was focused on that field. Yeah. And on that note, Johnny Bravo asked, Watson or Lamar?
Ooh, okay, so Watson with the Colts, and then you have Lamar.
Jackson.
Here's with I think you go Lamar, and
right,
because Lamar, they got to win. They know they have to win, and the way Lamar played last night was, I mean, it was like a pinch hitter the way he came back onto the field. It was insane, and he's a type of player that he's a leader and a playmaker. And they need to win this game to get into the playoffs. Whereas with Deshaun Watson, listen, the Colts can still get multiple points of pressure on him. And while he's so good, and if you had to play him, you'd feel comfortable with it, I think that his upside's a little less, because you saw what happened against the Bears when they got multiple points of pressure on him. He's still good, but his upside is a little tapped.
Okay, you were stumping for Tom Brady before the season. Are you still stumping for Tom Brady against the Falcons in Week 15?
Yeah, because he's getting together, because he's the most – they're frustrating. He's the frustrating player, because I apologize for those I stumped for, because I paid for it in our football guys redraft league big time. With all those bucks, I paid for it. But with that said, they are starting to get it together, and I think that against Atlanta, while the defense has played better, they're still not a great defense, and I think that – they're figuring out who they can lean on and who they can't, and how they're getting it together. And this is still a winning team that's going to the playoffs. I mean, the best quarterbacks keep making adjustments until they figure it out. And Tom Brady has gone through countless episodes where everybody's like, this is the end. This is a bad year. This is going bad. Write him off. And then it's like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have. And I think that, he's getting it together, and Scotty Miller's healthy, which is a big deal, because we saw that big bomb. We talked about it last Thursday. They have the best connection deep, and now that they're able to stretch the field again, this is good.
Maybe the best reason I think to play Brady out of this group, out of the quarterbacks that aren't your automatic starts, your Aaron Rodgers and Watson and Lamar, otherwise are automatic starts over this group. Kyler Murray, I think, is back in that group. Russell Wilson versus Washington. I still feel like you're overthinking it if you're benching Wilson for the guys we've been talking about. But Brady does give you the 4 or 5 touchdown upside. Brady gives you that pouring it on. He's done it a couple of times this year. That upside. The last one of quarterbacks, and then we'll race through the other positions. If you're telling yourself, I'm really going to play Mitchell Trubisky, it's the right thing then to say, no way you're going to play Mitchell Trubisky in the fantasy playoffs.
Well,
right. You can't just dismiss it. You can't just Dikembe Mutombo it.
Against Minnesota,
right?
And that weak ass secondary that they have. I would consider it. I'd put him in the same tier as Rivers and Tannehill. He was very efficient. They have good talent around them, and they're letting them get rid of the ball fast. And David Montgomery, who I like to joke is Captain Zigzag, and he's starting to play a lot better. I love his jump cut style. He's not the best running back in the league.
It is wonderful to see him starting to realize what we thought he could become in the NFL.
He's playing within himself. That's what he had to figure out. And once he's done that, some of the things he does in an isolated in a vacuum are really impressive. And so he doesn't overdo it. So I think they're playing well enough, especially with this defense, and that he's a viable start if you're desperate. I would consider him equal with Jalen Hurts. I would probably start him over Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm saying that, but yeah.
It's weird. I've been saying you can feel it out in Bears fan nation, Matt, that they're terrified of the idea of Trubisky leading them to the playoffs. Like, it's the worst thing possible if they can sneak into the playoffs.
Could you imagine if they get rid of Trubisky and he winds up a Jet and somehow he turns the organization around? That would be like the most oddball thing ever.
Right. Pair him up with, I don't even know who, someone like Joe Brady.
Mark Schofield and I talked about him going to New England and him being a pretty good fit there. He could be a good fit with certain teams, but he needs help around him like Mayfield and Tannehill.
Exactly. I wish we had like 2 hours to really develop some of these topics, because when I think of Mitchell Trubisky, I think if you put him in a similar highly managed situation, like say the situations that made Jake Plummer really good in Denver, you know, like just simplify everything. He does have physical talents and tools that you can leverage off of. Okay. Running back real quick. Are you going to give people nudges to play J.K. Dobbins and or Gus Edwards against Jacksonville?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go for it. I am. I know I am.
The way they looked. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I want to take a moment to say, and I'm not going to divulge too many football guy secrets, but during the preseason, we kind of check each other and say, are our rankings within, let's say there's like an Overton window for fantasy football rankings, like, it's like the acceptable window. And the funny thing is, Matt, I think you and I are similar in that sometimes I will rank a player in a way to just send a message to folks. And you sent a message with your Clyde Edwards-Helaire ranking that's like, just don't even think about him anywhere near his ADP, and it was right. You were right. This is another one of those examples where when we all get towards groupthink, and one of the things I love about my dear friend Matt Waldman is that you don't care what anybody else is saying. Like, some people say they don't care, but you really don't care. Like, if someone comes to you and says, well, your number 21 ranking of Clyde Edwards-Helaire is like 15 below anybody else in the industry. You're like, okay. Yeah. He's my 21st ranked running back. What about this week? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's because, when you work hard and you have a process, it's one of those things that if you're working, I don't want to say it that way because it's going to sound bad, and I don't mean it to. It's just like, I'll just put it this way. Because of the time and effort that I put into things the way that I do it, it's kind of like I have to trust what I do, even when I'm wrong. Even when I tell you Hakeem Butler's the best receiver that I've looked at in a while, or that or didn't like Demaryius Thomas way back then. Just did a whole show about wide receivers with Russ Landy, and we talked about all our screw ups. But yeah, the thing is once you do that, it's kind of like I have to trust that, and nothing made sense with that. So when you look at him now, it's like, this team just can't run the ball. I just don't think it can do it in spurts, but it's not really committed to it. Number one, it's not committed to it. And the offensive line isn't as good as it once was. So now they go from Miami to New Orleans, and now New Orleans is going to play them. Now they know how to play, because, they played Jalen Hurts like, well, we'll see what you do in the first half and figure out what we'll do in the second half. Bad idea. This week, they know they're going to be prepared and not underestimating this team.
Okay,
Edwards-Helaire is good, but not.
Well, he had 5 for 59 last week as a receiver.
He's
in a PPR league.
Yeah, he's marginal. He's on the margins there.
Yeah, well, he always has that potential. He did have 1 2-touchdown game, I think, against Denver. I don't remember exactly. He did have 1 2-touchdown game this year, because that's what we were thinking, like Damian Williams style. He was going to bring up the touchdowns.
He's your ultimate RB3, RB4 kind of flex play. That's basically it.
That is absolutely where he's been all year, and that's why I wanted to give a little moment to recognize that Matt Waldman was the only person in the industry saying, like, first round, come on, no, nah, and that is exactly how the season has gone. Okay, last running back, Raheem Mostert had an MRI, so his ankle's not doing well. If Jeff Wilson is the starter against Dallas, Matt, it's Dallas. how much are you going to shoehorn him into the lineup? Because the man does produce 2-3 touchdowns a game whenever he gets to be the man.
He's one of those that you've got to like take a deep breath and say he's probably your running back too. And you have to look at factors like, are you, to me, it's about if another running back too has a more difficult matchup, he has another player he has to compete with for touches, or you're depending on him to break a long run because he's a kind of a boom bust guy who has to get volume to achieve that, then you got to go with Jeff Wilson. As crazy as it looks when you look at just football from a standpoint of like this straight line runner who just does what he's supposed to do. But this offensive line puts running backs who do what they're supposed to do in position to have big games. So go for it.
Yeah, I think that if Mostert doesn't play, which is the big if, you're probably, and even if Mostert does play, Wilson has multi-touchdown upside because they're so automatic. Shanahan's so automatic calling his number in the red zone, and he tends to convert. So that's definitely one to watch where, even some of these guys we talked about, like the Ravens backs, other guys you might be excited to play if it's Wilson as the clear lead back because they have no confidence in McKinnon at this point. Okay, quick hitters on some receivers. Houston receivers, you can handle them together or separately if you want. Kiki Cutie, and you're one of the only people who's been there the whole way with me, Matt, on Kiki, but also Chad Hansen, one of the best stories of the 16-man practice squads. Are you more inclined to tell people, sure, you're tying yourself to Deshaun Watson? Sure. Or to say, it's fantasy championship semifinals. You probably want to go with somebody that we have more confidence in.
Listen, as someone who's had more bad beats in fantasy football than the Cleveland Browns, the Tennessee Titans, and the Seattle Seahawks put together, I don't do it's the fantasy championships thing. All three of those players are playing well. I think that QT has a better rapport with Watson in the red zone, whereas Hansen is a guy that offers a little bit more on the outside. So both of those guys can be options for you. One's a little more red zone heavy, one's a little bit more target heavy.
What if you have a tough call with Marcus Valdez-Scantling playing Carolina on Saturday?
I don't trust that guy as much as I want to like him. I have him in two lineups with two really good teams, the IDP Dynasty League that I'm doing, that I've got to buy in, and I think I'm going to play you or Batanti.
He played Hassan Reddick 77 points.
Oh my God!
Hassan Reddick had 5 sacks and 77 points against me. Batanti could always be a hero for that.
Well, see, look at that. So yeah, I faced Batanti, and I have Scantling seen my lineup once all year, and I have another league where he's seen my lineup all one year. I'm too iffy.
Nelson Aguilar. What a year resurrection for Nelson Aguilar.
What a year for that. And and you look at who he's facing. The Chargers. Yeah. I mean, that's one of those kind of like Jeff Wilson. It's like he's going to get enough targets. He's going to drop some passes, but you got to get over your past bias of him. This is a guy that he does make some plays, and they set him up to. And yes, this is the week possibly that Henry Ruggs ends up getting the big play over him, because it seems to happen every 4 to 6 weeks in some random fashion that Ruggs shows up. But Aguilar's the guy on that team. You got to roll with that. Look
who we conjured up. Matt Batanti says your team is stacked, and we love you too, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Quick hitters, just give me your knee-jerk reaction. And we aren't going to get to tight end. Just if you don't have Kelsey or Waller, pray, like light your prayer, Hawkinson, I guess, light your prayer candle. We could touch on some of the. You're going to play a Miami tight end this week, maybe. We'll see, that kind of stuff. Okay, real quick before we go off the rails. What has left you the most surprised this year?
What has left me the most surprised this year?
Yeah, what's the most surprising development?
There's so many different things that should come to mind that I just blank on. But I think that I was surprised that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that's the easy one. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers surprised me. I just thought that he and Arians would be on the same accord, and they weren't, and that was real disappointing. I was surprised with the Saints. I also thought that Emmanuel Sanders was going to be. That's another one I can apologize for. He was one of those outliers that I was just like, yeah, so I've got him ranked higher than everybody else by a mile. I don't care. He's good, and he's going to change the complexion of the NFC. Well, he kind of did with the 49ers, him not being there, but he was basically nothing with Breeze because teams, oddly, even though everyone was making fun of Breeze and his arm, teams were playing way off of Breeze. They were like, don't let him throw deep. So let's let him throw underneath. So he took everything underneath. That was probably a real shocker for me on that end. That was probably, and then I'm trying to think of, I was not as high on the Carolina Panthers. Like, I love Teddy, but I really didn't think that this was going to gel so quickly for their offense to the point that they were competitive for a while, to the point, so that was more of a mild surprise, but I'd say that was one. Those probably come to mind. I'm sure there's some that I'm missing. Yeah.
You don't have to apologize for Emmanuel Sanders. Look, he had, with Thomas out, he had 6 for 93 and 12 for 122. And then he missed a couple of games. Then he came back and had a touchdown in the romp over Tampa. They replayed that game in primetime, like on Wednesday here. Just as like, what are you doing Wednesday night? We're going to replay the Saints 38-3 beatdown because it was one of the greatest games in Saints history. Let's get the family together.
I really thought he was going to be like a steady top 15 wide receiver.
Yeah, but he also cost you like an 8th or 9th or 10th round pick, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, true.
Who has impressed you this year? Who's really left you like, wow, okay, yeah, you got my eye?
Well, shoot. Justin Jefferson made great.
Oh.
The dude, just what he did on the outside. I knew he could play on the outside, but I didn't think he could play on the outside, like to the level that he has. So he was really impressive. I thought Chase Claypool was better than I expected him to be early on. So I was impressed with that. I thought that was that was really awesome to see him perform on that level. Josh Allen, there's the shocker. There's the shocker.
Yeah.
I was Josh Allen, like every week, Josh Allen was good. And kudos to you. Kudos to you, because you were probably one of the few people that were like, he's going to develop into a good starting quarterback. Very few people thought that. Like for me, I thought, well, he might become a startable quarterback. He might, but he is way better than where he was, and he's built on what he's done, and that talent has shined through. So that one really caught my eye as a player, for sure. Darrell Henderson, I know he's not going to end up getting the love because Cam Akers is continuing to have that upward trend, and it's probably going to be a split where it favors Akers most of the time. But Darrell Henderson really revamped his game. He went from looking lost to actually being the better zone runner of the two backs that are going to be competing for more and more playing time. So that was one that was really nice. Tim Patrick, I'm going to say Tim Patrick, Josh Reynolds, and Olamide Zaccheaus, and there are a couple other players, but those two players, Patrick and Josh Reynolds, I want to see one of them in Detroit playing with Matthew Stafford, getting to be guys who can go up and win the ball in the air if Kenny Golladay isn't going to re-sign there. I think one of them could have, and Keenan Cole could end up having like Robert Woods like second contract.
Exactly.
Years. And Patrick to me was very impressive for what he's been able to do. So those were guys that came to mind immediately that really caught my eye. And then just, I guess from a defensive standpoint, like I think of some players and like Budda Baker has just been unbelievable. It's just so much.
Had that one game, I can't remember the opponent off the top of my head, but just he was truly everywhere. Every time there was a play, he was in the middle of it.
And another one's Javon Hargrave, the former Steeler. I'm sorry, but he's been, now that they put him in a position where he can just have one-on-ones as a defensive tackle, he's been a lot of fun too to watch, because man, he's got some moves on him too. He had a nice little hump move against the Saints last week that was pretty to watch.
So real quick, I love that you highlighted the contract situations coming up with Josh Reynolds, Keelan Cole, who's going to get Gardner Minshew back. So I'm not going to talk you out of playing Keelan Cole this week because they have a connection.
They do.
I like seeing these guys hitting a high note as they're about to shop their services, peddle their services around the league. Josh Allen. And it's interesting because I think that when I was asking this question earlier this year, Matt, the answer was always DK Metcalf. Like around the time he was running down Buda Baker. Actually, it was that game against Seattle. That was it, right? It was DK Metcalf. But it's with these primetime games now, and with Josh Allen, it's just he's so confident. Brian Dable, we only talked about Russ cook. It was letting Josh cook. This is one of the pass heaviest team in the league. They're going to remain pass heavy, and Allen looks so comfortable. And there's just something special that happens when a quarterback believes in his offensive coordinator, believes the plays are going to work, understands the why, and just is comfortable. Because Allen had a little stretch where he was pressing and falling back into some of his old habits, and we'll see. You still have New England left,
It's still there in his game, but it's not so much there that, like, if he loses a playoff game because he lost the game, color me not surprised in any way, shape, or form. But I'm not going to sit there and say he's a bust the next year because of that happening. He's not going to, I think in year 3, this is what we're going to get from him is something that he's a little higher, a little lower, but this is what they got from him. And teams can exploit some of his weaknesses, but most teams will no longer be able to do it consistently week to week.
And he can exploit their weaknesses.
Yes.
He can exploit their weaknesses. And Stephon Diggs and John Brown and Cole Beasley and Gabriel Davis, there's a rookie hit.
Yeah.
Dawson Knox needs to tighten it up a little bit, but they can exploit weaknesses. I just want to see, and I say this as a Steelers fan, like a traitor to my Steelers fan brethren. I want to see Mahomes versus Allen in the playoffs. I want to see a rematch of that.
Well, Buffalo's kind of that team like between Cleveland and Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And that you look at and you go, they're like your cousin. They're not in your division. They're not, maybe not in your immediate family, but they're that cousin you look at and you go, I see you. Yeah. We're related.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, Matt, when Washington beat Pittsburgh, and that means it's the end of the world. It's a Steelers fan, Chicken Little, like that.
That's a tough defense, though.
Yeah, but they lost to Washington, and Allen had played so well that week in primetime, also that I just find myself maybe my heart is following Buffalo and pining for that for the fans in this year. Okay, off the rails a little bit late, but it's a few minutes. I almost have a sense of deja vu. Like I've asked you this before, but I feel like it's periodically like a garden that we can water because I think some of the people listening to us right now like jazz. Some of them may be jazz curious. Some of them may be like jazz. Why would I listen to jazz? So give like the short pitch and maybe like an album or two if someone is listening right now and jazz is not part of their life, but we want to try to make it part of their life.
Well, I can tell you this gentleman, like up here, giving you this heavy metal sign right here.
Yeah,
I've been able to do that with over.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I'll tell you, the thing about jazz is that it's really about the interaction between the musicians and appreciating how they interact together and loving like musical tension and release. So it can be either very calming and have such a wide range of spectrums. It can be very calming and kind of romantic and lyrical, or it can be very sparse and kind of these expressionistic colors, or it can be really funky and blues tinged. So you have a lot of veins of how that music's influenced a lot of popular musics. So like for me, I find that, like Jimmy Smith organ trio stuff with like Gene Ammons and Jack McDuff, or Stanley Turrentine and Jimmy Smith, like Back to the Chicken Shack.
Yes, Back at the Chicken Shack is exactly what I was going to say. Go get yourself back at the Chicken Shack.
Yeah, or the Sermon. Those are good ones, and those are Pittsburgh guys too. Stanley, I'm actually learning a Stanley Turrentine solo right now. But those would be good ones to start with. Now, if you're a heavy metal dude, the one that got Bob Harris wrote me back, literally took a picture of himself with one of the crazy looks our buddy Bob gives, with a picture in the background of the video I sent him, was of Joe Henderson live in Japan playing a song called Junk Blues.
Mm.
And if you like heavy metal, you like thrash, you like anything that has like high intensity, that unending and doesn't give up, then you want like that song's a good one because there's a lot of drum interplay. It's a lot of geometric kind of shapes and lines that are, runs of music that really create is unending and gives this kind of swirling, churning, rhythmic kind of tension and release. And Joe Henderson is like an understated genius of an improviser because of that, because he'll play some of the most complex rhythmic stuff that's harmonically interesting, and then he'll play the most diatonic kind of simple stuff interspersed between it, but it fits very well. And him and the interaction with that drummer is fantastic. And if you like that kind of thing, because Bob was like, oh my God, it was like listening. I saw the link. Like I saw the link to this, and like I can't stop listening to it. Like he couldn't stop listening to it. Because like I was showing him all this other stuff that like had in common, and he liked all this like earth music and kind of this stuff that the Earth Suite, or I'm trying to remember who that guy was that he sent me. And then I thought, for some reason, I just had this intuitive thought, and I go, I don't know if you're going to like this, but I just have a feeling, and I love that stuff, the stuff that I sent him. So I was like, what do you think of this? Just no, I don't want to tell you why. And he just was like, oh my God, it's like my favorite of all that. So things like that, if you like that kind of thing, then it's like, then you want to like John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. Like A Love Supreme is probably, a Desert Island album, and that's intensity at its finest on that kind of level. If you like more like funk oriented stuff, that's more like backbeat, good funky backbeat with like R&B blues licks that still use some jazz concepts, then like the Brecker Brothers is a really good way to go. Strap Hangin' is a good song, or that would be a good the Brecker Brothers would always be a good one. And Lettuce is a good band that has some good players who I absolutely love. I've written a couple of RSPs listening to Lettuce and Snarky Puppy. Snarky Puppy is absolutely a great band that you would want to listen to. Corey Henry, the keyboard player, is a phenomenal. They're all phenomenal musicians, but those are compositional or funk oriented with world music and different things in between. And then if you just want classic straight ahead stuff that teaches you about the vocabulary, then anything by Charlie Parker is probably a good way to go. Miles Davis has spanned so many ranges of the music that you can check out his stuff that was influenced by Sly and the Family Stone, to like his very impressionistic music and modal music, which if you like modal music, which is more mood but theme based oriented, I recommend Maiden Voyage by Herbie Hancock, with Wayne Shorter and Freddie Hubbard, some great musicians there. And then I would recommend Speak No Evil by
Speak No Evil and Night Dreamer are like albums that I've worn out. I've worn them out.
Wayne Shorter is kind of like a comic book nerd. He is a comic book nerd, actually. Like if Jason Wood wanted to get into jazz, I don't know, he might like Wayne Shorter. But I don't know about that. But he was a comic book nerd, and he's very compositional in what he does. And then anything from Miles Davis during that period, like Kind of Blue, which even though it's an overly recommended album, in terms of that, everybody says it's like saying if you watch quarterbacks, you've got to watch Joe Montana, Johnny Unitas, and Dan Marino. I mean, it's the same thing.
Wonderful. And I hope that maybe at least one person out there goes on that journey. And I'll just add a couple of more low-hanging fruit. That Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers live at Birdland.
First cassette I ever got was that, and Maiden Voyage from a friend of mine who was a keyboard player that we played together with.
And that's more like frenetic. And you listen to that one and think about this: that there was no higher peak in jazz than to get to be in Art Blakey's band. Like that was it. That was the pinnacle. Yeah, everybody wanted to be a jazz messenger. Sonny Rollins, Saxophone Colossus. I just want to make sure we mention Sonny Rollins. Saxophone Colossus is just a good place to start.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the Miles Davis stuff. We were watching Scrooge. Remember Scrooge?
Yeah, and they had Miles with Sam.
Miles Davis is in there, the street musician. Yeah, I forgot about that cameo. I think probably when I go ahead.
And speaking of David Sanborn is in on that. While a lot of people would look at that and say that's kind of soft jazz, he's actually a very good musician, and he's a very influential musician for the saxophone with the sound. And he has a YouTube channel where he does collaborative efforts with a lot of different musicians, ranging from Michael McDonald to hip hop artists.
Mhm.
And he's like, and they play together and jam together. And he's been doing it recently from his home and then with COVID remotely. But it's very worthwhile because they talk about the process of music in certain ways that's accessible to the non-musician, but also very interesting to the musician.
And the private pile is in the chat room talking about Donald Byrd and Bobby Humphrey and Barry Williams, Duke Ellington. You get into orchestral jazz, Charles Mingus. The point is, there's worlds upon worlds upon worlds out there if it catches your ear and pulls you in. Like we get pulled in every week here on the couch, and always we get immersed with Matt Waldman. RSP. I can't believe I didn't mention it.
That's okay.
But we're getting to draft season. And it's certainly looking forward to the future in your dynasty leagues. The RSP is where it's at, Matt Waldman. RSP.com, April 1st, pre-order, and all those other good things. And I should do like Cecil says, by the way, if you've been joining us here, like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. You get to see us. We get to spend time together. More important than ever. Everybody stay safe out there.
And it's a rough year. It's been a rough year. Congratulations. Yeah. We made it through.
Exactly. Surviving.
Point. This is good. I'm like, that's worth celebrating as a whole, is that you've like made it through. If you've made it through without anything too major, congratulations. And if you have, well, reflect on what you got, obviously. And my condolences to those of you who've had to deal with that. It's been rough, but listen, we're alive. And sometimes that's enough.
And it can be a reset to just appreciating the basics again. Yeah. And then we get to have our roaring 20s. Here they come. So it's coming. Like I said, hopefully not ending in a stock market crash. So thank you, folks. We're going to be here doing everything we do at Football Guys. Week 15. We're here to help make those tough calls for you. So check everything out. Make sure to check out Matt's top 10. Always to give you everything you need to know from the week before. And we appreciate your support. We appreciate getting to be part of this with you. Fantasy football.
Sleepers, buy low, sell high. Tiers. The what you need to know each week. But everybody knows how great Bloom is. But we need to say it every once in a while.
Oh well, I'm just glad I have a seat at the table, and
I think you have a bigger. I think you have a booth, my friend.
Well, that's good because we get comfortable and on bottomless coffee. And remember back when you used to be able to smoke? See, we used to have Denny's Club when I was in college, and it'd be lots of cigarettes and coffee. Can I say that? Is my health insurance going to go up because I said that? Wait, I don't have health insurance, so it's not a problem.
Yes. Living the life in New Orleans.
That's right. That's right. It really is like Confederacy of Dunces. Like there's New Orleans and then there's everywhere else. So there's great stories. Great stories I'll be able to tell, adding more every day, folks. Thank you, everybody, for entertaining the thought of spending time with us, for letting us humor you and otherwise share what's been going on. We will see you hopefully in the finals. As always, stay classy.